Folks, this is Marco Palmera, and in this video I'm gonna destroy one of the most common myths that surrounds business deals around the world, and that is finding a good deal takes a long time. Now I think there are a few misconceptions there, and if you feel that finding a good deal takes a long time, it's gonna take you a long time, right? If you're a search fund, an advisor, a company that looks for an acquisition, and you believe it takes you a long time to find a good one, then chances are that's the result that you're going to get. But that is not necessarily true, and this is part of our limiting belief that most people have, and I want to break that down because in some instances, in most instances actually, people just look at finding deals as a very kind of like, they look at it in a confined box, and so they feel there are a set of things that set of actions that they need to take to source these deals, and then they just need to wait for deals to come through. The reality is you can be more proactive in your approach, and I'm going to break things down for you in a second. But the first thing I think we need to clarify is that there's a difference between finding a good deal and then executing on a good deal. Now, the execution part might actually take a long time depending on how you're structuring the deals and how difficult the due diligence process actually is. So, if you're buying a small business, due diligence might be simpler. If you're making an acquisition for a big company, or you're working as an advisor on a big transaction, the due diligence process might take longer. If financing is involved and you need to wait for a third party to approve the capital that you're going to use to buy the deal, then you might have longer periods of time that you need to accommodate for in order to get this deal across. But that is all part of execution once you already have a deal. And I think a lot of times people confuse the sourcing part with the execution, and they put them all in the same basket, and they say, okay, finding a good deal takes a long time. Well, the truth is that is not true. Now, if you have an unpredictable system for finding deals that doesn't rely on kind of like trackable metrics, then yes, it's going to take you a long time to find a deal. But finding a deal can be very, very fast, especially if you are going on the offensive, because motivated sellers are in the market right now. They're in the market every single day, and it's actually your responsibility to go out and spot them and find them, and then find the good ones, the few good ones that might be available right now in your industry, in your country, whatever. And so the first thing we need to clarify is that there's a difference between deal sourcing and execution. Execution might take a long time. There are a lot of variables involved, and I'm not going to cover them in these videos because they're dependent on your specific case. Deal sourcing instead is something that can take longer only if you don't have a predictable system in place. Some examples that I can give you: one, you're only relying on referrals. Two, you're leveraging brokers or third parties to source deals, thereby relying on them and their efforts to find deals instead of your own capabilities. And another thing that I might also mention is the fact that you don't have a streamlined solution to spot transactions and kind of like stack them up into your deal flow pipeline. And so what happens is you go through a cycle where you start sourcing deals, you get your pipeline filled, you qualify a few of them, submit a few LOIs, then you commit to some of them, you drop everything you're doing because you wanted to get that deal done. The deal doesn't close for whatever reason, and I don't want to be talking about unfortunate things here, but it is something that happens, and you're back to square one again because you dropped everything you were doing. You don't have a sourcing system that brings you opportunities like clockwork. So those are just some of the things that people do that compromise their ability to source a deal quicker. And I think we need to look at the sourcing process as two separate cycles. There's a short-term cycle and a long-term cycle. Let's start with the long-term cycle because that is what most people are familiar with, independently of them being a search fund, company that looks for acquisition, a advisor that is looking for deals, you name it. The long-term cycle is when you basically leverage your existing connections, your network, your reputation, industry events, all these activities that do take a long time to stack up to find opportunities and find deals. Now, can these activities produce results? Yes. And can these opportunities bring quality deals into your pipeline? Absolutely, yes. What is the problem of this? Well, as I mentioned, they take a long time. They're part of the long-term cycle. And so if you need to get a deal done within a reasonable time frame, you might be starving to death until these deals ultimately kick in. The second problem of these long-term cycles is that they're very unpredictable and untrackable, because even if you're leveraging your network and you have a strong network, or you're going to industry events and you can leverage your expertise and the kind of like connections you have to find deals, still, you're not going to have the ability to predictably track how much efforts you need to put in order to get X amount of opportunities into your pipeline. So you can really say, if I go to this event and I take 20 conversations, I'm almost 100% sure I can get 2 leads in the pipeline and one of them is going to be a good deal. You can really do that because, one, you can really know who's going to be at that event, and two, the amount of conversations you're going to have, whether or not these conversations are going to be irrelevant, and all this sort of stuff. And so networking, your existing connections, your references can be very inconsistent. And even if you have a strong network and a strong historical track record, you're not gonna know everybody there is to know in an industry to kind of like get access to every deal that is available at any point in time. And that can compromise your ability to execute on transactions, because again, one of your connections might bring you a deal today, but then the pipeline might dry up for 6 months, and then what do? I guess a lot of times people just go through this cycle and they say, okay, it's just part of a process and we just need to accommodate for that. But the problem is, after they do a deal and they're very happy about it, then they become worried again because they say, okay, now I need to go back on the hunt and I don't know where my next deal is going to come from. That's a really uncomfortable situation to be in, especially if you're an advisor, if you're an acquisition team that wants to make multiple acquisitions. If you're a search fund, it might be less relevant because we just need to make one deal and you're happy. But for those that make multiple deals, this can actually be very challenging. And so how do we solve that? Well, we solve for that by implementing a short-term cycle. And a short-term cycle is a process that is kind of like mapped out to produce tangible results and have trackable metrics that we can work on to see how much effort we need to put in to get X amount of results. So if I need to backtrack it for you, let's say we need to do one deal by the end of the year. And today we are early June 2025. So we have 6 months, give or take, to get a deal. We might exclude December because not a lot of stuff is going to get done. Okay, we got 6 months. How many good opportunities we need to see in 6 months in order to get to one deal? Well, we might say, okay, we need to see 5 opportunities a month. Okay, it's 30 in total that are good. Okay, how many actual deals we need to look at in order to get to 30 opportunities? Because not all of them are going to be good. So let's say that 1 out of 3 is a good deal. And I'm being optimistic here. Okay, we need to see 90 deals in 6 months. How do we get to 90 deals? Well, then it becomes a question of what kind of output we need to generate in order to find these 90 opportunities. And then it becomes completely discretionary to the industry you're in, the market you're in, and what works best in your industry. You might say, okay, we just need to pick up the phone and call people, or we need to create email campaigns, social media, letter campaigns, you name it, voicemail drops, SMS. There are tons of ways you can go about that. You can patch in different channels of outreach that actually source deals directly from the owner of market so that you can get the outcome that you seek. And this is a really scientific method. And sometimes I see people that go about doing things in a little bit naive way, thinking that time will solve things. Well, in reality, if you map things out in an appropriate manner, you can kind of like tangibly understand what type of input can generate the output that you seek. And I think, again, most people don't want to go through that exercise, maybe because they don't have the technical knowledge or the time to get that done. But that's why you can outsource the deal flow process to somebody else, like us, for example, to kind of like get that support and build that pipeline on your behalf, so that you can then focus all your attention on what you do best, which is closing the deals. Now, this short-term cycle allows you to do a few different things. First, you're not starving, so you get deals in predictably and you got stuff that you can work on. Two, you have options, so you don't need to necessarily put all your eggs in one basket, because you always have deals available. And that kind of leads me to the third point, which is you have more leverage when you negotiate, independently if you are an advisor, or if you're a owner, or if you're a investor looking to buy a business. If you have multiple options, you can comfortably walk away from a deal that is not penciling out or that is going sideways. But if that is the only deal you have and you spend 5 months sourcing it, then it becomes a very different conversation, right? And it becomes a question of, fuck, if I lose this deal, I'm back to square one again. I need to waste half a year to source another one. That kind of like, subconsciously influences your ability to make the decisions that are in your best possible interest. Most people might not realize that, but that is actually the case. And so the objective of the short-term cycle is some of the things that I just mentioned, creating a pipeline that is predictable over time, and then wait for the long-term cycle to kick in, because I'm not saying that you need to disqualify the efforts that you put in networking, leveraging your own expertise, your track record and stuff. We just need to accommodate for the time that is going to need for these things to kick in, and have 2 cycles that run at the same time, so that we can get opportunities predictably, going out on the offensive, while at the same time having the inbound stuff that kicks in for us. So I feel a lot of times people look at it in a very restricted way. Well, instead, deal sourcing is very creative and is like, how do we find the best possible way to source prospects and get them to connect with us in a meaningful way, so that we can build relationships and kind of like find the good deals that nobody else is able to find. Because especially if you're dealing in a very competitive market like UK or US, for example, there are going to be a lot of people competing against you for the good deals. And if you just stick to the conventional approaches, chances are you're going to get what most people get. And yes, you might get some exclusive deals through your network because they're confidential to you, but is that really enough for you as an acquirer, for you as an advisor, whatever? If you want to scale and get more deals in the pipeline, have more options, and kind of like close more deals, close more opportunities, then creating a system that kind of like merges short-term cycle and long-term cycle is mandatory from my perspective. And the beauty of it is like, even the short-term cycle compounds over time. And most people don't believe that, because they feel, okay, I'm just going out trying to find deals, and if somebody's not interested, that's it. It's not a good lead. But in reality, if you have the right follow-up system in place, then you can create a short-term cycle that nurtures people over time, over 30, 60, 90 days windows. And what happens is, a lot of them that might not be thinking about selling their business right now might become interest later on. And if you have that system operate properly, they're going to get back to you. And so after 60, 90, 120 days, you can start see people coming back at you, and you get this kind of like increased input from them. And so the short-term cycle is ostensibly created to get people that are interested in selling right now, so that you can solve the problem. But you can also get other people to reach back at you later. And so you kind of get 2 things at the same time, plus you add to it your long-term cycle, you're getting 3 channels that are bringing you leads, and that kind of like compounds the effects of your deal flow and can create a pipeline that is much consistent over time and more fruitful for you independently of what you're looking to do. Looking for sales side clients, buy side clients, acquisitions as a search fund, acquisitions as an entrepreneur, that works for basically anybody. And we build systems like this for almost anybody around the world, finding deals. And curiously enough, for the most skeptical ones that didn't trust the short-term cycle, we given them the opportunity to try that out for 60 days and then see what the outcomes were, and most of them ended up working with us for longer. But long story short, I feel we're looking to build a pipeline of deals, businesses for sale, short-term cycle, long-term cycle should work together, and you can build on that and then create a more effective and productive pipeline for you and the company. Check out my other videos if you want to dive deeper into the technical aspect of how to set up these things, how to go out and kind of like build systems that find deals on your behalf off market. And we will then talk in the next video.